So, my friends, today I come to you as a wanderer between worlds. For at least 20 years, I've been designing indie games, but also have done web development, general app design, full stack solutions, and I'm currently the CTO of a small startup called Sound Scouts, where we design and develop digital hearing screening solutions. All of this has been in small startup generalized context instead of big enterprises, but this has allowed me to see a few constellations, and even though it could be a surface level of different topics, these are all topics that go from even just focusing on game development. They go from programming languages, of course, but apart from technical stuff, it just touches on game design, touches on music, on architecture, visual art, communication, narrative writing, all sorts of beautiful things. And the great thing about it is that it has allowed me to see a few interesting connections between all these domains, between all these concepts. For example, the ideas behind software architecture captivate me as much as physical architecture, because behind both forms, there is a question of not only how will our creations interact with the external world, but also how all will other humans inhabit and navigate our spaces and our code bases, precisely phenomenological software. And it's from these connections that I started thinking a few things that might be interesting to share and to share with you today. But before that, for a bit of interactivity, I'm a game designer after all, I'd like to know what domains do you all work on? Because every time I come to this meetup and get all these amazing ideas, I get really curious about what is everyone's actual domain, right? What are they currently working on that they're applying in their own minds? So if I start with myself, everything from audiology in my current role, from ebooks to educational games about climate change, training for endoscopic surgery, marketing, game publishing, made a book about sharks some time ago, VR and all sorts of things. But could I ask for a few shout outs? I know from Chris talks, he used to work on a e-commerce platform for schools, and then Lantern Pay, which was all about navigating commerce between the government agencies and service providers in terms of healthcare. But can everyone give me a few shout outs or what their domain is at the moment? That's training? Trading. Trading.
Manufacturing workflows.
Nice. I have a few examples around that. Manufacturing workflows.
Energy.
What was that?
Energy.
Energy. Oh.
Yeah, well, it's include trading, but it doesn't have to be trading. Trading in the case of it is exposed to the spot price of Australia, but it can also be time of use. In that case, it's not trading. It's just optimization. Optimization behind the meter of assets.
Nice. So see, it's already so much variety, because you see as a scanner, and that is someone who loves to keep learning new things rather than specializing in one topic for their whole lives. DDD is like being given a scooter to efficiently navigate a domain and explore and enjoy these things. And as a game designer, when I see a domain model diagram like this, of course it's a restaurant, but I almost salivate from the playful potential of those interactions, because I see this and it's like, that's a game design diagram. That's the game, a restaurant management game. You're serving, you're managing your finances, and you're taking something that's applied to the real world, but you start making it playful, right? And that's sort of the core of what I'm sharing today. Because it's for modeling those real systems that a rich history of simulation games that have already existed for 25 or more years, that started with SimCity, and now speaking about manufacturing this Factorio and all these things. And to use that word again, is the key phrase here is that games can offer systems that are not only interfaces or representations, but they are playgrounds and simulations to be explored and tinkered with without fear of failure or without fear of real world consequences. And with this, we're now getting into the why domains in play. Because games are ultimately about having fun. Like Jean Piaget say, play is the answer to how anything comes about. It's the source of creativity. And playfulness itself still has stigmas that date back to Puritanism, the Victorian era, the Industrial Revolution. I mean, education in general still hasn't recovered from that factory mindset, that serialized thing. I mean, look at this crap. It's been 200 years. Yeah, it's like, has the world not changed in 200 years to have a different model? We still have basically the same thing in our classrooms. And this is part of the why it's been stigmatized, that playfulness, that creativity. But obviously, research of play itself is vast and could cover a whole conference by itself. But this quote captures that. The opposite of play is not work, it's depression, right? We can all have amazing time doing things at work, or we can having terribly boring times at home. This is slowly changing. I saw a talk recently about the Lego serious plays method. It's doing some really interesting stuff. What I love about it is that they encourage playing with Lego pieces, right? During meetings, during team planning projects. And the basis of it is that people are representing what they're talking about in abstract Lego constructions. And they call them models. They call it, yeah, your Lego model is your abstract representation. And of course, this is not yet applicable to software or anything, but by the fact that they're calling them models, even if they're abstract, it's already starting to feel like, yeah, models is something that comes from creativity, and playing with that. It's a catalyzer. It's a highway to finding solutions and having very rich brainstorming sessions. And at the very basic, and I already tried this at my own work, is even just bringing a bunch of like little pieces and toys while having team meetings. It's so much fun because it gives physical people to at least be tinkering with their hands, and you start making things even without realizing, and that's already something really fun. Also, I don't know about you, but I'm personally way more productive when I'm having fun, when I feel more intrinsically motivated by what I'm doing and the learning that it drives. So rather than also just thinking on some pure efficiency or output metric, can we ask, are we enjoying this? How can we make this more enjoyable? And of course, DDD in the end all boils down to communication, right? With the stakeholders, with developers and everything. So play and games in general, they are again a fast lane for the exploration, but also for trust building. And really, without thinking some form of productivity, why shouldn't fun be a goal in itself? Making life more worthwhile seems like a pursuit that's worth fulfilling in itself. Now, jumping into the practical ideas on how to apply some of these concepts and dividing it into being more playful with your company processes, but also actually making some games out of the domains that you're going. But before that, there's a distinction that I always like to present, which is extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. Sometimes when we think about gamification, the first thing that comes to mind can be leaderboards, scoreboards, competition, achievements. But that is like the icing of the cake. It has its place, but it's not the real meal. That's just like frosting. It's to make a good meal, you need to actually get intimate with the domain. As an extreme example, imagine a physics test with some space concepts, and with extrinsic motivations, you can just add a bunch of quizzes and stuff. And if the student does well, or if they show some effort, just give them a gold star. Hey, you did a good job. Okay, it's something, but you can also give them something like Kerbal Space Program and have them design their own spaceships, they actually feel and play the concepts to intimately understand what they're doing, and having goals again, and having some simulations that are only possible with games, and especially computer games, when we're talking about all these interesting systems that are constantly evolving and playing with each other. At my work, Sound Scouts, our main project, I was saying, is the gamification of digital hearing tests. And usually the clinical context of that is you're put into a booth, you hear some tones, and every time you hear the tone, you're meant to press a button. And you be there for like 10 to 15 minutes just hearing tones, beep, beep, beep. That is really boring, especially for kids. So when we started designing this years ago, we started thinking about, okay, how can we make this still clinically valid, but at least give kids some interesting motivation? And one of the ideas was that the basic idea for this activity is, well, there's a distractor noise, but that has a context in the game, which is the helicopter is going. but you're a ranger in the park, so you have to find these animals. And every time the radar of the helicopter finds something, you'll hear a tone. And if you hear it, you press a button, and then you'll find the animal that you're looking for and say, oh, okay, you're tracking the wildlife. And this has been extremely successful for all kids. We've done over 150,000 tests now. And if we can count the number of, in our hands, the times that they haven't been able to finish the test out of engagement, if not for other problems. This extends to other digital hearing sub-activities. For example, hearing in noise, speech in noise, which is an essential skill in a classroom. You have the teacher in front of you, but you have a lot of distractors on the sides, all the other kids. So this activity tests that, and the kid is given instructions on what to put on the park, what to return, and the context of the distractor sounds is that you also have a walkie-talkie, so you are trying to ignore the other things, but you're doing your main job. In a little bit more on the processes of the company, however, as we developed this, we realized, okay, this is actually becoming a proper medical device a few years ago. And if you have ever seen or touched on the world of regulated medical devices, it's extremely boring, bureaucratic, and it's a swamp. There's so many metaphors about dealing with the TGA, dealing with all these sort of international standards and etc. So that is currently like my ultimate challenge as a game designer. How can I make this as least painful as possible? And as I, by nature of being a tiny startup in CTO, became the quality manager as well, I started integrating some of these ideas of regulatory management into the training sessions. So for example, instead of coming up with something new just for efficiency, I customized a game called Codenames, and we gave it our own terms and meanings in the context of regulatory compliance. And yeah, you even just by virtue of having a game, makes people more relaxed and makes them talk about it and have a laugh and stuff. And of course, going into making a game out of the domain that you're dealing with, it can sound ridiculous if you're thinking about like a full commercial title with years of development. But there isn't a size fits all for these things. I often participate in game jams where in just a couple of days, people come up with amazing little things. Literally in a weekend, this is one example. Speaking of manufacturer management, you're directing the movement of these little cards and the products, and this was done in just a weekend and just 2 days. And one of the interesting things that I want to keep exploring this topic is that if you think of your domain and it still seems like it's boring even to gamify, maybe that's not your core domain. Maybe it's boring because that's a generic domain or a supporting domain, because the core domain should have something that the key problem that no one else is doing and should inspire some passion in being, how can I simulate this and play with this, right? So I'm looking into that. And of course, it's not just digital games. Board games are super easy to prototype. Cardboard pieces, dice, etc., and they can go a huge distance towards expressing them. They've seen a lot about climate change, for example, and keeping a balance in an ecosystem. These ones called harmonies, and there's a lot of interesting stuff being done like that. But if you do want to think and express something in the realm of digital games, the mainstream coverage of them still seems like it's all shooters or platformers. So if you're on the train, you mostly see people engaging with abstract Candy Crush style things, where it's interesting because it's completely made up domains with rules that are completely arbitrary, but they provide interesting things. But like as I was going back to the beginning, the simulation games is actually like it's like the silent majority, I like to call it, games like The Sims, and that genre is constantly expanding and covering more and more domains. For example, did you know that the Euro Truck Simulator is in the top 10 selling PC games of all time? It's literally the game where you drive for hours slowly from one city to the next, and it's incredibly popular, incredibly. Or Stardew Valley Top 3, it's a cozy management game about a farm, hospital management games. And of course, some of them, it's not just about finding that efficiency or modeling as close as possible, but some of them are taking a domain and doing art, saying something political with it, like Papers, Please, where you're putting the role of a border agent and you have the power to reject or accept people into your country and the consequences that come with that can only be expressed in a game, dealing with the guilt and the pressure of your job. And that is quite interesting. While I was preparing this talk and looking for recent examples, I just looked at this, like, I don't need to say anything about them, right? Seriously, that you go around with your clipboard and you're like, yeah, I'm a parcel. This is not sold as an educational game. It's literally being commercialized as, yeah, you'll have fun inspecting parcels because why not? So yeah, I'm getting over time now, so I'll leave you by this quote by Peter Gray, which is play is not necessarily all or one. We're not like, oh, gamification, everything, or nothing, right? There's degrees of playfulness. There's degrees of play. We can all bring a little bit of playfulness into our activities and into our thinking, to just like how DDD can be applied a little bit to make things a little bit more coherent. Also, game design and playfulness can be brought little by little to make things more fun and enjoyable and easy to explore. So thank you. That concludes my goal. Hopefully, I've given you a little bit of that playful spark and hit me up for any game-related questions. Hopefully we can continue breaking down the stigmas of games, and we can all learn more and learn happier. That's it. Yeah.
Have you looked at game rules engines to help with the games? Is there any standard sort of rules engines you use?
Does that relate to like the Game of Life by Conway, where it's
no, they're basically,
sounds familiar.
There's a lot of commercial ones out there, right? But the thing is, they're not open platforms. You can actually interoperate with your own system. I built one. Yeah, so basically, all the rules of the the domain can be, the domain is your data.
Yeah.
Then the rules can change, right? So you have that separate system. So is there anything like that?
No, I haven't. I'm gonna keep talking to you about it because that sounds really interesting. So it's like a plug system where you bring your domain. You can customize rules into your business, your domain, and then you plug it into your data type thing, and then you can. That sounds really interesting. Yeah, no, I should look more into that.
Field.
Yeah.
It's been around for 50 years.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine it's more of the enterprise thing that I haven't had as much of a exposure with so far because I've been.
Like I said, they usually don't make it open so that you have to.
Oh yeah, I have a whole lot of talk about open source and all that kind of thing that should be. But anyway. Oh, is there any other question at this point? Anything?
As a software developer, I say to people, in the right environment, I'm like a big kid let loose with his favorite toy. I mean, we're builders, and sort of we're so fortunate that we're sort of the material we're working with. Say it's okay, code is such a malleable material, right? So we're building, say, buildings or bridges, right? We don't really get the opportunity to sort of make too many mistakes, right? Whereas, say, with working with software, we can iterate. We can learn by iterating, and even learn sort of, well, what provides the application stakeholders with even more business value. So we're not restricted to big upfront design and sort of waterfall, a waterfall methodology.
Yeah,
other engineers in other fields are.
I meant, yeah, the separation, for example, architects and so on, and civil engineers, their models are probably in CAD, some computer simulations, but the difference between that and the real thing, it's huge. And yeah, for software, it's not that big. We have a lot more opportunities to play in that in between, to do more prototypes and do more things that are closer to the real thing, yeah.
Yeah, but the next step is to get the business to play. I build systems where business plays. And with behavior-driven development, I've given them, with Cucumber and all that, and SpecFlow, basically let the testers, but before the system's been released, testers can test the domain, fully test it, so that scenarios that each developer is doing his bit doesn't care about, but obviously the end user cares about how you use the domain, so they can have play, they can play with the system. Yeah,
I mean, bringing the QA and bringing developers again. That's what all DDD is about, right?
Not at the end,
not developing.
Yeah, with DDD and with BED, with SpecFlow.
Prototyping and then thinking about that. Yeah, it's about having fun and coming up with ways to break things and more often.
So that's basically write text.
Yeah, I've seen it through Jira X-Ray plugin, again through the regulatory, looking at plugin systems. Gherkin and all that stuff. It's interesting having the language to describe behavior like that. Yeah.